Watch out!
Alright, it is 2025, and even after 3 years, one thing is still for sure. Nobody who played Bayonetta 3 is still quite over it. It's such an enigma of a game experience. One second the developers are showing that they understand how to craft a satisfying game, and then the next it's like they purposely sabotage themselves. The highs of Bayonetta 3 are above and beyond the sky and even space itself, yet the lows are deeper than the bowels of hell. How does one game have some of the most sublime combat in any game ever, yet feel so unpolished? How does it have the greatest spectacle from a game in the last decade, yet have the worst graphics in the series? How does it have an insanely awesome premise, but fall so flat with what might be the most unsatisfying ending in gaming history? The decisions made in Bayonetta 3 were baffling, to say the least, and because of that it's so crazy to think that I still love and adore this game. Many of us do. And I think it's because we all see what it could be. It's so close to being one of the best games ever made. We taste it every time we boot the game up and fight with its awesome combat mechanics. The visual flair, the feeling of possessing overwhelming power, the satisfying chants emitting from Bayonetta's mouth. Bayonetta 3 sells that Bayonetta doesn't do boss fights. She is the boss fight. And it does so better than either of its predecessors in my opinion. So why then? How does it feel so incomplete? Well, quite simply, it feels like there's a lot missing from the experience that is hinted to having been there at some point. We know in retrospect that Bayonetta 3 went through problems during development. We know that it had its development almost entirely scrapped halfway through and restarted. We know that issues arose with the original voice actress, and we know that PlatinumGames had its own internal struggles going on and were losing core members left and right. But Bayonetta 3 deserves better. The state it was in on release is impressive given everything that's happened, yet now that the dust has settled, I think now would be a great time for PlatinumGames to evolve it into what it deserved to be. It actually feels necessary that they do this before making Bayonetta 4. Matter of fact, it's the only practical path forward that they have to rebuild trust and excitement from the series from their fanbase. With the Switch 2 having been recently announced and its capabilities revealed for the general public, it's hard not to remember the one Nintendo exclusive game that screamed for better hardware and a general redo in many aspects. Yeah, that's Bayonetta 3. Let's start with the obvious. Bayonetta 3 needs to be remastered for better hardware. If we were to have a Switch 2 edition, we could clean up the ugly, mushy textures that plague the environments. We could also fix the lighting and allow Bayonetta herself to have more of a presence during the on-screen havoc. Cutscenes on Switch 2 could also give her more presence on screen, with the depth of field effect and the use of lighting, similarly to what Bayonetta 1 and 2 did. Currently, she just kind of blends in with everything on screen and is constantly shadowed underneath it. We could use the highest poly models for characters at all times, rather than how the Switch 1 constantly had to replace them with lower poly LODs, even when up close to the camera. This was especially prevalent in the Tokyo segments, and pretty much everywhere when playing in handheld. I'd even take this a step further and say PlatinumGames shouldn't just give us higher poly models for the characters, but they should fix and replace their faces and expressions entirely. Currently, many fans don't feel that Bayonetta looks like herself at all in 3. Not only that, but her expressions look far more lifeless and uncanny than they did in 1 and 2. It's odd that previous games managed to give her more natural movements to all her facial rigs, particularly her mouth, eyes, and eyebrows. And yeah, like I said before, I think a complete overhaul to Bayonetta's face card in 3 is absolutely needed. The changes should look as drastic as the Tomb Raider reboot, from its PS3 version to its definitive edition on PS4. Like, look at how much different and better Lara Croft looks. Bayonetta's face should have a similar evolution to the Switch 2 edition. Thule canon should be remade entirely. For those who don't know, every Thule area we traverse in Bayo 3 is the only holdover from when the game was being crafted as an open world title. You'll notice it's actually far lesser in quality as such, so I'd love to think that PlatinumGames hasn't just been biting their nails the last couple years, but have been working on completely remaking this area for a remaster, because this is like Pokemon levels of bad. It straight up looks like a GameCube environment on a Switch game. That's not a comparison you want for your game. The frame rate can also actually be made not only steady, but even higher than ever with Switch 2's 120 FPS capabilities. Bayonetta 3's combat is amazing, but one hiccup we all faced with it was constant frame rate drops, which, admittedly, changed timing for movements and enemy attacks just enough to where we the player would get hit unfairly at times. I also urge PlatinumGames to rebalance the game to where enemies don't attack from off screen. Bayo 3 was the first and only game in the series to allow this, but I think that making the enemies more aggressive and durable will be a far more satisfying experience for players if they got rid of the fact that they can hit you off screen. Now, these are just many of the ways that the performance and visuals for Bayonetta 3 can be improved. These are huge aspects to be fixed for sure, but I also think Bayonetta 3 would benefit from additional content and even additional context. For additional content, I very much believe we should have more costumes added for Bayonetta. I figured this was a given, but she should at the very least have 2B and Astral Chain outfits added. Many fans also want her outfit from the prologue cutscenes to be playable, so there's that too. PlatinumGames should allow all of her hair suits to have their stripped versions during Demon Slave. Bayonetta 2 and even Smash Bros. Allowed both of her outfits from 1 and 2 to peel off when she summons demons and portals. So why doesn't Bayonetta 3? It's just common sense if you ask me to have this added in. The game also needs more dialogue added and possibly a complete rework to Bayonetta's voice lines that we already have. Let's talk about that second part first. Jennifer Hale didn't always do a great job of having Bayonetta sound like Bayonetta. Not only was her voice too high-pitched a lot of the times, but she also spoke with the same fluctuations and cadence to her voice lines, even the ones that preceded and succeeded each other. It was very jarring to hear back while playing the game. So not only do I think she should redo her lines to have more variety and fluctuations, but I also think she should keep her deeper voice on lock for any time Arc Eve Origin Bayonetta is on screen, aka the Bayonetta we play through for most of Bayonetta 3. I may sound like I'm being critical of Hale here, but it's only because she showed the ability to mimic Bayonetta well whenever she voiced the Bayonetta 1 and 2 variants. So it baffles me how much she let go of that effort when voicing our Bayonetta that we play as in 3. Okay, so now I want to bring us back to the concept of additional dialogue. One of the biggest reasons Bayo 3 didn't make sense is because of the lack of speaking lines. PlatinumGames has a habit in this series to not explain their concepts of their world during the campaign itself, but rather disperse it to us through text logs that we can collect. In 1 and 2, this was tolerable, even if they could have put a bit more explanation in their cutscenes. However, in 3, this is just egregious. One reason why is the text logs in 3 don't even explain nearly as much as they should. Plain and simple. These should also have pages added in the Switch 2 edition. However, the most obnoxious part of 3 is the amount of wasted space in cutscenes that can be filled with dialogue, or even parts where scenes should be extended to allow for more dialogue and explanation from characters. Like, how many times did we watch Bayonetta sit there and stare into space as the people around her died? Even her own counterparts. Some simple dialogue or maybe even an extra shot or two showing her try to do something but something stopped her would help immensely. We should also get more dialogue to allow for character moments between, say, Bayonetta and Luca or Bayonetta and Viola. Bayonetta and Cheshire would be good too after Bayonetta Origins. Heck, even Bayonetta and Sigurd or Jean and Sigurd. All of these additions could have given the ending some actual weight, but instead we have a hollow shell. So that's something that we can fix in a remastered version on Switch 2. We should also get some dialogue explaining concepts we see on screen, like why the Arc Eves turned to crystal, or what the heck was going on with all the released Arc Eves towards the end of the game, where they're there but maybe not there, and the same with Jean, and how Bayonetta 1 and 2 got there in the end, or what that light Luca was emitting means for him and Cereza when they're getting dragged to hell. Like, come on guys, PlatinumGames, explain your We shouldn't be having to make up for you. You do know that these things would be a million times cooler in your game if you gave a why and how to everything happening. This also feeds into another form of additional content we should get: a complete rework to some cutscene choreography. I already kind of gave an example of this on how Bayonetta should be shown making an effort in scenes to stop the havoc around her and have dialogue added showing that she cares, but beyond that in general, PlatinumGames needs to redo many scenes to make them more believable. A great example of this is when China Bayonetta gets grabbed by Pyrocumulus. No way she just stood there while that giant-ass hand popped out of the lava and slowly moved to grab her. Or, no way Japan Bayonetta got by an enemy that barely did any damage in gameplay and that we killed in 2 or 3 hits. Rework these cutscenes to make them believable, please. Currently they make no sense and it just makes players mad, as you can tell by the tone in my voice. Finally, the biggest form of additional content we should get in a Bayonetta 3 Switch 2 edition are extra chapters. Now, I have a couple suggestions for this. One is obviously to have playable chapters. Now, PlatinumGames, if you're worried about these getting in the way of the game's pacing, then there's a simple and elegant solution. Have these chapters become available after we finish the main campaign, or just make them optional bonus chapters to give us more insight and context to different story beats. Like, we don't have to select it on the screen, but we can, and be told that we could watch and play them if we want additional context to something that's happening at that given point in the story. So if they do decide to go with the post-game route, maybe they could do something like give us chapters where we play as the Bayonetta 1 and 2 variants, and show us how they arrived to help Arc Cereza in the end. We could also have more chapters where we play as Jeanne and her explaining her plan for exploiting Singularity now that we know that she knew her future ahead of time thanks to Bayonetta Origins. Conversely, we could also get unlockable cutscene chapters that aren't playable but simply watchable. These could be unlocked either during the campaign or be optional to watch before we start the next chapter, or they can be unlocked after beating the game to give us more context. These could focus on things like Viola's mother Bayonetta, and the things that whole world went through. They could focus on explaining Lucan's involvement in the story. They could focus on the Bayonetta 1 and 2 variants that we talked about that come in towards the end. Heck, these could focus on the lives of the different Cerezas that we meet throughout the different multiverses. God, you guys created a fictional world with so much depth and potential. Please, let's just put it to good use, and I promise it will elevate your game so much, PlatinumGames. Just look at how well Bayonetta Origins was received by fans. That game had no shame telling a story and taking its time to do so. We clearly love the world and stories you guys have to tell, so just tell them. But for now, I digress. Bayonetta 3 is not only, in my opinion, the Switch 1 game most deserving of a Switch 2 edition, but it's also one I believe needs it before the series moves on from here. Please, PlatinumGames, don't be twiddling your thumbs after seeing the terrible reception to Bayonetta 3. Just fix it. You have a great avenue to do it with the concept of Switch 2 editions, so please, by all means, do it. Everyone will benefit from that. You and your fans. But for everyone else watching, let's comment below more things we want to see in a Switch 2 edition of Bayonetta 3 so we can all discuss it. Afterwards, check out more of my videos like this one here where I dive deep into all the ways Bayonetta Origins helps improve Bayonetta 3's story. The link is in front of you and in the pinned comment. If you'd like to support me during these tough times and want your name featured at the end of all of my videos, please join my Patreon with the link in front of you or in the description. I've been johtojonny, and I'll catch you all there.